Welcome to another video. In this video, we're going to talk about RGB LED and controlling it using 3 buttons. And this is pretty challenging just because of the number of components, and the code got a little tricky, but let's go ahead and get right into it. We have 3 buttons, as you can see here, and then we also have an RGB LED. And first thing I had to figure out is I wanted to figure out which pins I'm going to connect to, and I did change my mind because I wanted them all on the same side of the board, as you can see here, just to make it cleaner. I wanted all those connections over there, so this part wouldn't have wires all over the place. So we're setting the LED pins as 13, 14, and 15 for red, green, and blue, and then the buttons is 10, 11, 12. So, and I also color coordinated my jumper wires as RG and B, RG and B. These are 10, 11, 12 for the buttons and 13, 14, 15 for the LED pins. And just a reminder, this is how my particular RGB LED is situated there. We have red here, and then we have the longest leg is the ground, and then we have green and blue after that. And I always just remember that the longest leg is ground, and the longest leg is ground and goes to ground, and then the one by itself is red, and the other 2 are green, blue. That's how I remember that. But that's how that's hooked up. So, and we also have the red, green, and blue pin for this LED are all going through their own 220 ohm current limiting resistor before they go to the GPIO pin of the Pico. And then the buttons are hooked up to the pins of the Pico, like we talked about, and then the other side of the button, of each button, is hooked up to ground. Okay, so that is the setup as far as the board goes. Let's take a look at the code. So the code is pretty lengthy. It does make sense though. So first we're going to import pen from machine and sleep from time, and we're going to go ahead and set up. This section is just setting up the pins that we're going to use for our red, green, and blue buttons as 10, 11, and 12, and red, green, and blue LED pins 13, 14, 15. Then this section right here is just configuring the 3 button objects as inputs with pull-ups actuated, and we're using these variables from right here to set these pin numbers. And we're doing the same thing with red, green, and blue LEDs here, except of course we're configuring them as outputs with Pin.OUT method. Okay, and the logic here, we need to have, the goal here is to, let me go back to the other view. The goal here is whenever we press the button, press the red button, and then release the red button, that's when we want the state of the red portion of this, or the red LED in the RGB LED, to toggle. If it was on, we want it to turn off. If it was off, we want it to turn on. But we don't want it to do it on the press. We want it to do it on the release. So we need to store 2 values. We need to store the old value and the new value, and we compare the 2. So if the old value was a press, which would be a logical 0, and the new value is a release, which would be a logical 1, then we want to toggle the state of the LED. I hope that makes sense. So let's go back to the code again. And we need to have a now state, an old state, and then also a current state of the LED itself. This current state right here is what we're actually going to quote unquote write to the LED when we get done. When we figure out what state we want it to be in, that's what we're going to write. Because you can write true or false to an LED for the value, and it'll treat it just like a logical 1 or 0, which is actually pretty handy. So all we're doing here is setting up our now and old and LED state variables for each one of the colors. And then now we're into our main loop. And this looks like a lot, but really it's the same thing 3 times for each one of the colors. So let's just focus on this red LED and red button here. So red button state now equals red button value. What we're doing here is we're reading the current position of the button. And like I said, if it's pressed down, it's going to read a 0. If it's up, it's going to read a 1 because we're using pull-up resistors. Okay, so now we're going to say if the state now is 1, which is up, and the last state or the old state was 0, which is down, then we want to our LED state equals not our LED state. All that means is if it was true, now it's going to be false, and if it was false, now it's going to be true. It's a toggle, which makes sense because we're making toggle switches. Okay, and then this line right here is where we're writing that state to the LED itself. So we can just write as using value the current LED state, whether that be off or on, and the LED will either light up or not. And then we just have a pause here. I'm not even sure that's necessary. I have it in. Actually, it will help somewhat on debouncing. The waiting for the transition between like going down and up, and then putting that little bit of pause there should debounce it pretty well. All right, and then at the end of all that, for each color, now we just need to set button state old to button state now, and then we go back through the loop again. And I'm hoping this makes sense the way I'm explaining it. And the rest of this code here is just doing the same exact thing for each one of the other colors. As a matter of fact, once I was happy with this bit of code, I just copied it and then I pasted it twice, and then all I had to do with the way I had the variables set up is just change the R's to G's and then the R's to B's in this section down here. So hopefully that makes sense. Let's go ahead and reconnect the Pico, and we'll go ahead and switch just to the Pico, and I'm going to upload the code, and all the all the colors are currently off. Whenever I press the red button, it should not do anything, and it does not. Whenever I release the red button, it should show us a red LED, and it does. I'm hoping that shows up well. There, you know what, if I turn this light away from it, you can see it a little better. The colors are a little washed out. And then if we, same thing here. If we press it again and then release, on the release it should toggle and it should turn it off. Okay, and we'll try it with green. Perfect. And then we try it with blue. Perfect. And then now we can do combinations as well. We can turn them all on and we should get white. Okay, and then we can turn red and green on and we should get something pretty close to yellow. It's not really showing up very well on the screen there. Sometimes if I put a little piece of, if I put a paper towel in front, it's more of a greenish yellow. It's still can't really see it too well. It's kind of overexposed a bit, but just trust me on that. Okay, and then if we do like a red and a blue, then we'll get like a purple. And yeah, y'all cannot see that at all. But trust me, it is purple. Let's see. Yeah, you can kind of see it now. But yeah, this works really well. Good project because you have to do a ton of wiring here. And also the code is real easy to make mistakes because you have so much code here and so many variables you're tracking. Something I did find very helpful is to, of course, keep my Raspberry Pi Pico Pin.OUT handy. And also, before I started writing the code, I went ahead and laid out all of my variables on paper, and that was pretty helpful to me as I was writing the code, because otherwise the variables are pretty similar, and I was getting confused sometimes, or I could potentially get confused. So, very fun little project, little confidence builder for where I'm currently at in my learning. Thanks a bunch for watching. Bye, y'all.